Good afternoon guys and welcome back to Maverick Baking. If you are new to the channel or to any of my content, my name is Kelly and one of my biggest goals in life is to become a pastry chef. Now whether this is in the kind of traditional setting with a white apron and the big stupid hat, or if it just means working in a tiny bakery of my own, supplying people with as much sugar and butter as they need, it's a dream either way. This dream of mine, however, is a little bit out of reach at the moment, mostly because of my terrible finance management, but also because I don't quite feel I have the kind of refinement for this kind of job yet. Upon spending so much time by myself and spending so much time indoors during the various lockdown and quarantine restrictions of 2020, I had a bit of reflection. Why don't I just fecking teach myself this stuff? For Christmas last year, my wonderful partner Francesco, who you may have seen on the channel before, bought me this very heavy book. This is Le Cordon Bleu's book on pastry. Le Cordon Bleu are probably one of the most famous cookery schools on the planet, originally beginning in France, if the name and the bleu didn't give you a clue. These guys are world famous for producing fantastically skilled chefs. And I thought, this book has been sitting on my shelf for literal months and I have done nothing with it. So I've decided to turn that on its head. And in this series, we're going to make every single recipe in this book. And I'm going to teach myself how to be a pastry chef. And you guys are going to come along with me, I hope. So today is the first installment of this video series and I am incredibly excited to bring it to you because it has been over a month in the making. We're beginning with my preferred area of everything, and that is chocolate. Let's go. Okay guys, we are currently in October and it is October the 21st at the moment, and this is officially the day we are kicking off the first recipe of this teach myself to become a pastry chef with Le Cordon Bleu challenge. We're making chocolate truffles, a classic treat enjoyed the world over, typically made of a kind of milk or dark chocolate. And today we're going as simple as we can. It's going to be a chocolate ganache with a tempered chocolate coating and a little bit of cocoa powder dusting. Let's get on it. This is kind of what we're supposed to be going for, a cocoa dusted, super rich chocolate truffle. This recipe starts super simple, just by melting together some chocolate over what is known as a bain-marie, and this is literally just a pan of boiling water and a bowl on top. Okay, so the book did suggest using plastic gloves for this, but honestly, I don't really see how it's going to make any difference. I'm not the biggest fan of plastic gloves just because, you know, it's really hard to buy a box that doesn't have hundreds in them that I just won't use. And having clean and perfectly cool hands for this is just impossible. Like, this is what's happening. My hands, as you just saw, are a sticky mess. And these are basically melting. I have no idea what kind of zombie icy hands you need to do this job. But I'm gonna keep going. We're gonna do this. Okay, finally we have all of our truffles rolled. Here they are, the little blighters. I think we have about 40. We were supposed to have 46, but honestly, I've probably eaten the equivalent of at least 5 just in the process of making the ganache and rolling it. As you can see though, they're so super sticky. You know, even though I refrigerated these for a good kind of couple of hours, they only recommended refrigerating them for 5 minutes, but I have refrigerated these for a good kind of 2 hours. The ganache is just so soft. I don't know if it would maybe be best to kind of have these frozen first, or if the plastic gloves really are that important, but either way, we are done. What we need to do now is get these dipped into some lovely tempered chocolate and rolled in some cocoa powder. I introduce you to the truffle assembly line involving some tempered chocolate. Tempering chocolate is just a process where you melt it and then get it to a specific temperature for optimum shininess and crack. Our chilled truffles, some cocoa powder. Let's go. Truffles, tick. I bring you the exquisite mess of 40 plus classic chocolate truffles. My God, it is so dark in here. It was messy. It took way longer than expected. It was much trickier than I expected one of the simplest recipes in the book to be, but the cocoa. Gorgeously sumptuous chocolate truffle. The effort was worth it. Okay, so the second chocolate recipe that we are tackling from Le Cordon Bleu are their brownies. They do acknowledge these are not French. This is not a classic French technique by any means, but it does kind of involve a little bit of fanciness and evolution from the typical kind of US style brownie with the topping of a very fancy chocolate ganache. A few things threw me in that the recipe contains no cocoa powder and a very, very small amount of flour, so I'm yet to see what that is going to translate to in the finished bake. But the recipe was fairly easy to follow, definitely a lot less fiddly than the chocolate truffles were, and I'm intrigued to see how this chocolate ganache is going to go. I'm a bit of a kind of firm believer and have even tweeted several times that if a brownie needs frosting or toppings, it's a bad brownie. So I might be about to eat my words today, but let me show you what stage we are at just now and let's see the finished product. As you can see, we have a lovely kind of shiny, crackly top. It's not as kind of deliciously flaky as I like a brownie to be. It does look a bit more kind of cakey, but we'll see how that works out. Now, the interesting thing about this recipe is that the brownie requires to be chilled for 12 hours, which we have done. I was actually going to do it for less, but my day has not allowed that. Similarly, this chocolate ganache, which I have made, is now wonderfully thick because it has been sitting here for hours and hours and hours. So it is a perfect kind of pipeable temperature now. Not too dissimilar from the truffle recipe. The ganache is supposed to include glucose, but I did use honey because flavor. Anyway, the next step, as I will show you just here, is that we need to pipe our ganache onto our brownies after trimming the edges. So let's get on to that. Don't really know how big to make these. I guess like that. Here we have Le Cordon Bleu brownie. As you can see, it is wonderfully dense and fudgy, which is always the good sign of a brownie. A brownie, no matter what your preferences are, should never be cakey. Cakey is just a sign of overbaked. Thankfully, it is every bit as dense, chocolatey and chewy as it looks. I think that extended period of chilling time has really kind of helped the gluten in that flour develop and just made this so dreamy. One thing I will say is I did leave the walnuts out of the recipe like it suggested. Personally, I like my brownie as pure as can be, to be honest. But super, super happy with this recipe. It's worked well and it tastes good. On to the next. Okay, people, today we tackle a baking nemesis of mine. We're taking on the chocolate fondant. The chocolate fondant is an undeniable classic. I believe it has its roots in France, as you know, most of the recipes in this book and most good recipes ever do. There are kind of two types of chocolate fondant, really. The first is the classic chocolate fondant. Now, this is essentially where you would just have a chocolate batter that you would underbake and serve immediately, which would then have that lovely kind of molten gooey center that the chocolate fondant is famous for. The other way, which is the modern or the kind of cheats way of making a fondant as kind of gooey and luscious as it is to either insert a chunk of chocolate or a kind of little ball of chocolate ganache into the center of the fondant batter before baking, which means that even if you do over bake the mixture, you will have a kind of foolproof chocolate center. The interesting thing about this particular recipe is that it kind of blends both of those together. And instead of being made in the classic kind of stainless steel fondant molds, we're making it in cupcake cases. So there are many weird variables and many things that can go wrong here today. Now, the reason I kind of call chocolate fondant my nemesis, highly dramatic. I'm sure you would expect nothing less from me at this point. But I have only ever made chocolate fondants twice in my life. The first time I underbaked them and they were basically chocolate lava, but delicious chocolate lava. The second time I made chocolate fondants, they were overbaked and they were essentially just really delicious, moist chocolate cupcakes, but still wrong. So today we're going to be tackling the Cordon Bleu Cheats soft centered chocolate fondants. Let's go. As directed, these have only baked in a 190-degree oven for 7 minutes. That's it. While they do look like they've kind of puffed up and cooked around the edges, the middle still looks like it's going to be really, really soft, and some of them are already starting to collapse. Whether that is a good thing or not, we'll find out soon. The Cordon Bleu tells me to cool these for approximately 5 minutes, so I'm going to go and make a slice of toast, and I'll see you then. Okay, what we want from this little chap is we want to be able to get it out of this case without it collapsing. We don't want the chocolate to have stuck to the bottom of the case, and we want it to be gooey in the middle, but not raw. Okay? Let's go. So I'm going to have to kind of carefully unpeel his edges here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you see that the sides are off. All of the sides are off. We've done it. Look at my little guy. He's so small, but he's so perfect. Is this what it feels like to have a child? Okay, so all is good on the appearance front so far. You can see that we're going to have some kind of softness in the middle there, but you can see that we have that nice, gentle, squishy cake. Just look how delicate that is. I'm actually really stressed at the thought of spooning into this. Shall we do it? Drum roll, please. Oh, yes. So you can see from our close-up, we've managed to get that kind of hybrid texture. If anything, I might say that this is slightly over, but we've kept that gorgeous kind of gooiness at the edge. As you can see a little bit in the picture, you know, we've got that kind of dark, gooey cakiness that isn't totally raw. And we've managed to keep that gorgeous chocolate molten in the middle. Now, the last time I made fondants, the whole thing set. And while obviously it tasted good, this is it. Oh, I'm so happy. Shall we taste this beautiful thing? Just look how gooey. It's desperately trying to escape. It won't even focus. Focus on my creation, sir. Oh well, you guys saw how gooey this was. Let's taste it. I love chocolate. That lovely kind of softness of the cake on the outside that just gives way to that perfectly gooey chocolate lava center. Not too sweet, not too heavy. Obviously very rich, but it's kind of managed to escape that side effect that chocolate fondants can sometimes have, where the rawness becomes a little bit kind of sickly. This is what we want. This is what we want. On to the next. Okay, folks, today we're either being extremely efficient or extremely overconfident, because we're going to make 2 of the chocolate recipes left in this book. Just to give you a quick sneak peek, there's already an insane amount of ingredients just sitting, cooling, waiting to be used here, but I'll show you about those in a second. So today we are going to be making 2 kinds of chocolatey lollipop things. Now this is something I have never dabbled in, mostly because it's just what we here in Scotland would call too much of a faff. It's too fiddly, and normally I'm just not into that kind of recipe. Let me show you what we're making today. The first recipe in today's experimental chocolatey creation is going to be these blackcurrant praline lollipops. Do not be deceived. They look very simple, they look very tasty and easy, but oh boy. So the basis of these lollipops is a sort of chocolate-based paste, which is to be made, rolled out, stamped, and then essentially just dipped in some lovely tempered chocolate. And then we're going to use what are known as transfer sheets to get some kind of sexy finish on them. So I'm quite excited about this. I've never made lollipops before, and I've never used transfer sheets, so it's all very new today. And the second recipe we are going to be tackling today is for these chocolate orange bâtonnets. These things, which I was kind of under the impression that even though they do look like Magnum chocolate ice lolly things, I thought these were going to be kind of almost fudge-like treats. Turns out we are actually freezing them. So we have a fancy mold that we need to put these into, and we're going to fill it not only with chocolate and chocolate ganache, but also a praline orange crunch and some crunchy almonds on top. Hence why there's a lot of bowls going on all at once. So at this stage, obviously a few things are already prepared and we're ready to move on to the next phase. So let's go. This is made with melted chocolate, black currant, and praline. So I just went ahead and purchased a simple kind of black currant jam to use in this, and it seems to have done the job perfectly well. Alongside that, the new ingredient in today's recipe is that praline paste. Now this stuff admittedly was not cheap, but I am not joking when I say it is absolutely stupidly delicious. And Francesco and I have eaten half of the tub in the past 3-4 days before I even got started on these recipes. And what we're just doing at this stage, as you can see, is we need to roll out our paste, and after that we're going to refrigerate it, and then we're going to cut out our lollipop shapes from it. Okay, onto the kind of rolling component of our second set of lollipops, the crunchy orange almond chocolate bâtonnets. These also involve a little kind of paste to be rolled out. So this paste has been made with, again, chocolate and praline paste. It's also included a little bit of butter and what was supposed to be crushed wafers. Again, I only needed 25 grams for the whole recipe, and I was like, you know what? Just can't justify it. So I thought, what is a kind of caramelized, dry, crunchy biscuit? And the answer, of course, Biscoff biscuits. Lotus Biscoff biscuits are good in just about anything and will provide that same kind of crunchy texture. It is still super sticky, so we'll just need to see how this goes. Probably pat it down a little bit. I was about to roll with some paper, that's no good. Thankfully I have an Italian in the house, so access to mattarelli is always available. We're just going to gently roll this out. Okay, to our blackcurrant lollipops, we have now chilled this into a kind of solid disc for the center. We have a little biscuit cutter, and I'm just going to stamp out, hopefully, around 20 lollipops. And then we're going to get them dunked and finish them off. So what we need to do now is take these lovely little chocolatey discs and just impale them with a lollipop stick, which I realise is now a bit problematic because these aren't very thick. But we'll see how we get on. We're probably going to have to do a little bit of patchwork because these seem to just kind of be breaking as I put them in. Feck. Update. We have melted and tempered a big bowl of chocolate. The chocolate is no longer in the bowl, obviously. The chocolate is in this mug, rather neatly. It's not in the recipe or in the instructions, but if I'm going to be dipping and like dunking lollipops, I think it makes more sense to do it in a deeper container rather than a wider one like a big bowl. Might make sense, I don't know. And we have our very ugly lollipops. So they look ridiculous. I really should have kind of paid more attention to the size of the lollipop sticks before I bought it, because they just look absolutely bizarre. I imagine they're probably going to taste good. So I now need to dunk like 27 of these in the chocolate. So we have our blackcurrant praline lollipops setting here, setting in other places in the kitchen, some disasters here that will be my afternoon snack. And over here in this kind of obnoxiously lit area of the kitchen, let me just resolve that. There we go. We have some mess, a chocolate thermometer, and we have started kind of gathering the bits and pieces for our chocolate orange bâtonnets. So this is the kind of funky little mold. I really, really love it. It's very kind of bendy and flexible, which is great. And so what we've done here is we have just kind of brushed the base and the sides of this mold with some tempered milk chocolate, which is hiding over here. We're gonna let that set for just a couple of minutes. Then we're gonna add this, our praline crunch, and yeah, I'll show you in a sec. So the tempered chocolate in here has just about set. We have our ganache at the ready. We have our little rolled out kind of rectangles of that Biscoff praline crunch stuff. This is exactly the definition of fiddly. Guess what? They're ready. And the transfer sheets worked beautifully. Annoyingly, there will be a little bit of wastage. I guess I should probably be more precise in my measuring next time, but look, they're so shiny. Ooh. But I think it's about time we actually taste our creation to see how it is. You get a good taste from the blackcurrant, nice and sweet, not too dark. Not bad. As for our bâtonnets, they are unmolding as we speak. Then we need to dunk them in just a final little bit of tempered milk chocolate, get some sugared almonds on them, and they will be ready for tasting. Look at these bad boys. Our chocolate orange praline bâtonnets are complete. They are adorable. My hand is covered in chocolate, my apologies. So while the chocolate on the outside isn't totally set yet, just because first of all the book didn't tell me to, and second of all I have no patience, but everything inside should be either cold or kind of frozen. Let's see how it is. Oh wow. While it might not be super visible, you can see that ganache is kind of nice and set. A little bit of crunch in there, sweetness from the almonds. It's actually not as sickly sweet as I expected. Very, very indulgent though. These ones are incredibly fiddly. It's not probably the first recipe I would recommend. And I do think I've pushed that lollipop stick in just a little bit too far because I did bite into it within my first bite. But utterly delicious. On to the next one. Okay friends, it is time to finalise our tireless tirade into mastering the French art of chocolate. The amount of chocolate I have powered my way through in the last month is actually quite ridiculous. But yes, these are going to be the last two recipes in the chocolate segment of this series before we move on to mastering confectionery. And I'm mildly terrified about that one. But let me show you today's two final recipes and let's get going. The first we are making are these passion fruit chocolate bars. Now these are a gorgeous milk chocolate shell filled with a passion fruit almond paste and some passion fruit ganache, which as you can see I've already begun making notes on. The second recipe is going to be for these mendiant style caramel chocolate fingers. Now a mendiant typically is like a big chocolate button that's covered in kind of fruits or candied fruit and whole or nut pieces. I must say for today's two recipes I had real trouble finding that sort of flat-edged cylindrical mold. So for the lollipops I am using the same lollipop mold I used for the orange praline lollipops, which is fine by me, always good to get more than one use out of something. And for these I'm actually using an eclair mold, which I thought was similarly kind of French and patisserie enough. So here we have the kind of ugly beginnings of what is going to be these passion fruit chocolate bars. As I kind of said, the interior is made of a sort of shell of this passion fruit almond paste, which is particularly ugly due to the kind of squishing I had to do to get it into the mold. It's basically made from a paste of almonds, passion fruit, and sugar, which is kind of cooked and made into a paste before being cut into little rectangles and put into the mold. We then fill the kind of cavity that this leaves with a milk chocolate passion fruit ganache, and I can already attest that it is delicious. So this is going to be dunked in some tempered milk chocolate. We're going to allow it to set, get a little kind of transfer sheet on the back as we love, and then we'll be able to taste it. As for our caramel chocolate fingers, this is the mold I am going to be using. It is much kind of wider and deeper than that in the recipe, but I'm hoping that the recipe is supposed to allow 10 fingers, so this will give me at least the 8 I have in this mold. I've already prepared the jar of caramel needed for this recipe. It's a lovely kind of dark caramel that had some glucose added that kind of prevents any crystals from being formed. So this is going to be piped along with some classic chocolate ganache into a dark chocolate shell, and we will finish those off. The only time I am grateful for the cold windiness of Scotland is when it comes to having to stand and temper and cool chocolate, because doing it beside a windowsill is almost as effective as doing it in a walk-in fridge. Let's allow the dipping to commence. This is really difficult one-handed. Passion fruit bars are kind of underway, total mess. Some of them have started to melt, but we'll ignore the ugly ones for now. There definitely are some pretty ones, which you will get to see very soon. Otherwise, we are preparing this tempered dark chocolate to brush into our molds for our mignon chocolate finger things. So let's get on it. 1 big bag of caramel, 1 big bag of ganache. Let's get these babies filled. Why? Why would you burst? This was not supposed to happen. Okay, caramel time. This one we are not going to spill. Just look at that precision. So I had to kind of spread it out a little bit as it had almost cooled too much in the time it had been kind of sitting at room temperature. So I'm just going to get that final layer of chocolate over the top, which we have in a bowl still melted, and we'll get these set. The passion fruit pops are done. This is actually one of the kind of uglier ones, but it's the one I wanted to test first. So as you can see, the chocolate has set with a nice bit of shine there. Not so much on that side, but we don't have to look at that. We have that lovely kind of snowflake transfer. The stick, as last time, is too long for the purpose of these lollies, but let's taste our passion fruit lollipop. Let's see how it is. Oh wow, look at that. This might be one of the best kind of examples of defined layers I've given you so far. But you can see that gorgeous milk chocolate passion fruit ganache in the center. And just around the top in that little kind of arch is that passion fruit puree, and oh my word, it is so good. It has all the kind of passion fruit flavor of a smoothie, of a porn star martini, of, you know, any kind of fruity summer ice lolly. But with this beautifully creamy, milky cocoa flavor to go with it. Well, folks, we have managed to get some relatively decent looking chocolate caramel fingers until you look at this side. So while we've managed to get some lovely smooth tempered chocolate on top, I think I've had a bit of an issue with the temperature changes on this side. That's kind of what's caused this white bloom, as I believe it's called in chocolate making. So the chocolate itself, I think, is okay. You know, there is a decent actual shine to it. I think the problem is maybe the caramel, the ganache and the chocolate itself should have all been of a similar temperature, because they do not look particularly pretty. They look good on this side, but that's about it. So the last stage with these is obviously to just add these little kind of decorations to it, and then we can bite in. Anyway, enough nonsense, let's taste our mendiant style chocolate caramel fingers, which have turned out to be less like fingers and more like Snickers Duo bars. They're enormous. Let's take a bite. Absolutely gorgeous. That caramel has stayed kind of nice and soft and gooey without being sticky or kind of pouring out everywhere. The chocolate ganache has set into just a little kind of chocolate truffle texture. So it's still soft and smooth, but it's still firm. It's not going to melt out. And while some would probably call that shell a bit too thick and even a little bit disjointed, it's delicious. The dark chocolate and the caramel balance each other out. Now, this is a hefty snack compared to the one in the book, but you know what? I will take that. It could certainly be worse. Okay, we can officially cross the first chapter out of our Le Cordon Bleu pastry course. This has probably been the most expensive chapter that there will be. Oh my God. But it was truly delicious and I have actually learned a lot. I've learned how little patience I have. I've learned how much skill and care it takes to make chocolate perfect. I've played with a lot of new flavors, especially with a lot of new flavors being combined with chocolate. I've learned some classic skills in the truffle making and the fondant making, and some new kind of fancier skills like with all of these lollipops that I definitely still have to eat. It's given me a kind of newfound appreciation for one of my favorite ingredients, which has been fantastic. So with chocolate out of the way, the next step of my homemade pastry chef journey is going to be confectionery. It's one that I have pretty much no experience in, so it's going to be a real plunge into the deep end compared to this chapter. I can't wait to share it with you guys, and I hope you enjoy. But for today, for this month, for this chapter, it's all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you for the next installment.